Got it. And you can take 3 deep breaths, giving your body the signal that now it's time, it's okay to settle down, to relax. And if you notice that your mind is moving very quickly, that it's a little hard, difficult to settle down, just acknowledge that. You know, this is a positive part of yourself that wants to take care of things, wants to fix things, wants to solve problems. But right now, it isn't really needed. Right now, what is needed is this more calm, peaceful place. And you're not rejecting it, you're just setting aside that need to control, to fix. And you can come back to it later. It'll still be there. And then set a positive intention. Recognizing that we don't want suffering, we don't want difficulties, that we do want happiness. And this is actually a positive thing for us. It shows our love, it shows our compassion. And that we're going to do this practice today, this teaching, in order to bring that to ourselves. And then we can think about all the beings who are having difficulties in probably the same ways we are. Fear, the uncertainty, the change in our lives that has happened, uncertainty about finances, uncertainty about health. And we can just have compassion for everyone globally who is feeling this, doesn't know what's going to happen. And approaching it from a place of peace. Acceptance. that will actually allow us to deal with it more effectively. So now bring your awareness to your breathing and locate it at the level of your stomach, down in your abdomen. And as you exhale, feel all that tension release. Each time you exhale, you settle more deeply into your body. Allowing any fear, any nervous energy to just release. In this moment, it's a time to rest, to be calm. And if you still find that your mind is very busy and keeps going toward thoughts, you can replace those thoughts with counting the breaths, or even simply labeling the breath. I'm breathing in, I'm breathing out. I'm breathing in, I'm breathing out. And this gives your mind something to do that is still engaged with this peaceful, calm feeling of watching your breath. And each time you get carried away, gently bring your mind back to rest on the breath. And then stay with it just a little bit longer. And when you're ready, you can let go of the counting, let go of the labeling, and just become absorbed in the sensations of breathing. Noticing the abdomen going out, noticing it coming in. Observing the rhythm. So when you're ready, come out of that, come back into your room. And we'll do a little review of what we talked about yesterday. Oops. Okay. So we were talking yesterday about, we went over the Four Noble Truths, finished that up, and then we went into mind earlier this week, characteristics of mind. And then we did a little bit on our Buddha potential or our basic goodness. And I wanted to revisit that basic goodness for a moment, because I was reminded of a teaching, and it came out a little bit in today's meditation. this idea that so if we look at what loving kindness is and what compassion is, loving kindness is this wish for all beings to be happy. We don't usually use the word love because love tends to get confused with simply romantic love, and also sometimes obsessive love. And so loving kindness takes it back a little bit. So this idea of having loving kindness and compassion being basically, part of who we are. And I talked a little bit about His Holiness and the studies that he's mentioned about children, us needing nurturing, our needing our connection to life when we first start in life is about love, about being loved, about people wanting us not to suffer and trying to remove our suffering. And we can take that even further to recognize that we every day are looking for ways to be happy, right? Ways to relieve our suffering, ways to decrease our discomfort, creating situations in which we can have more love and connection and happiness in our lives. And if love is wanting all beings to be happy, and our basic impulse is to want to be happy, that connects us to this sense of love being our basic nature. Okay. So, and we talked a little bit about suffering, but even when we're suffering, and it teaches us something, it's so that we don't suffer again, and that's what compassion is about. So compassion is this feeling of dissatisfaction, disappointment, emotional pain. Right now we may be feeling some fear, anxiety, um, about what's going on right now, and that wish to be free from that, to have things go back to the way they are, as they were, as quickly as possible. This wish to be free from suffering for ourselves originally is actually the fact that we have compassion as our basic nature. We don't always necessarily manifest it in that way. We may manifest it more as like a self-serving kind of way, but in its essence, it is actually love and compassion, wanting to be happy, not wanting to suffer. And so that's this basic, and it's always there for us, no matter what our external circumstances are that are going on. We always have this impulse to happiness, which is love. Okay, so that's part of that Buddha potential, that basic goodness. So when we get into these meditations and working with our minds, this is what we're trying to eventually do, is actualize this loving kindness and compassion in our minds, in our hearts, as well as our wisdom. And through this calm abiding meditation, we actually start to clear away some of the garbage, you could say. It's not necessarily all, I don't know that I like that. We start to be able to help the mind work more efficiently, in the sense of the monkey mind is constantly moving from one thing to another and trying to get at this and grab at that, and imagining all these possibilities of things that could happen, that may not happen. And it's this very powerful force that isn't necessarily always helpful to us. Sometimes it gets more in our way because of its habits, because of this habit of distraction, this habit of anticipating all the possible negative things that could happen. And so through calm abiding, through relaxation, focusing, allowing our thoughts to emerge without engaging with them, can actually get some of that, allow the mind to be more in touch with our own inner wisdom, with our own sense of what is really best for us, what is really, honest, in terms of this situation. They talk about, afflictive emotions like anxiety and anger and depression, that these things often are, it's like 80% or something. I think His Holiness often quotes Aaron Beck, who was a researcher in depression. He talked about 80% of what we imagine is not going to come true. Okay, so but yet, because we have this capacity to think about the future and to imagine all the possibilities of what could happen, we can get really stuck in that. And so this practice of calm abiding can help us really sift through what is true, what's actually happening, for us, and in our situation. And do we really need to get so overstimulated and so afraid? Okay. So that's the first step, is starting to practice this calm abiding, this time when the mind can actually rest. And then the second one we talked about was analysis, or vipassana, which uses our thinking ability. Couldn't see you for a minute there. Uses our thinking ability to sift through some of these things, but we do it from this place of calmness. So here we can actually analyze and question if our experiences are really true or not. And from a Buddhist perspective, we have these really powerful habits of ignorance that don't necessarily see the world as it actually is. We tend to overlay our perception with ideas that are not necessarily true. And one of them that we're going to talk about today is this tendency that we have, that we're going to live forever, that nothing is ever going to change, that somehow we can create situations that will externally, that will continue to make us happy. That if I just get things organized in this, this way, this perfect way, that then I am going to, have happiness for the rest of my life. This idea of happiness ever after. And the concept of impermanence, of the constantly changing nature of things, is that it isn't true. And we're seeing this now. We're seeing that the huge changes on a global level, completely out of our control, have interrupted our usual way of acting in the world. And so now we have this, like I said in the first class, we have this incredible opportunity to work with this situation, to work with these conditions, to respond to them more effectively. Okay, instead of contracting in fear and depression and anger, about how things are being handling, we could really go there. Or we can use this as an opportunity to start to see that the world is like this all the time. It's constantly changing, and that death is a real possibility for all of us at all times. And then how do we use that? This is the reality of the situation. Now, how are we going to still be happy, still deal with this, even though this is the situation? And so one thing we have to remember is that we are incredibly strong. We are incredibly resilient. We have dealt with, and if you look back in your own life, many of us have dealt with extremely difficult situations in our lives, losing loved ones, losing jobs, dealing with illness, even, the anxiety in our times about, climate change. And now this, pandemic that we're dealing with. But we have a huge amount of strength already that we just have to bring to light, right? We have to get in touch with, through calming our minds and not getting wrapped up in what could happen and what might happen and what's going on. More of like, okay, I have a strength, I have an ability to deal with this. I remember when I've dealt with it before. I have this inner strength. And it's through meditation that we can start to access that. Okay, so I also wanted to talk about another type of meditation that I didn't get to yesterday, and that's mindfulness, which is also known as open awareness. So let me share this with you. Okay. Oh, it keeps doing that. Just don't have it. All right, there we go. Mindfulness. Okay. So mindfulness is kind of a hip, word right now, and isn't, we hear about it, but we may not know more clearly exactly what it is. So I want to do a little bit of explanation so that you get some more insight into what mindfulness actually is. So, one aspect of mindfulness, sometimes we think it's simply being aware of whatever is happening. So, like if we're doing the dishes and we're doing the dishes mindfully, we are aware of, the feeling of the dishes on our hands, the warmth of the water, the slipperiness of the soap, whoever might be around us, the sounds of the dishes. And this is becoming absorbed in the experience of washing the dishes. But the other aspect of mindfulness that is also present is this awareness of being conscious. The fact that we have the presence of awareness of these things that we are interacting with. So not only do I feel the warmth of the water on my hands, but I also am aware that I am conscious of being present with this sensation of warm water. Okay. And this is very important when we come into a present moment, because oftentimes we can be doing the dishes, but our minds are someplace completely different. And if you drive a lot, you can experience this, where you drive from one place to another, but because you become so absorbed in what you're thinking, you don't even remember that you drove from one place to another. And so this process of mindfulness, this being present, as well as being aware that we are aware, can help us actually with memory. Because if we're present with whatever experiences we are having, they're more likely to get imprinted in our memory, in our minds, to get transferred from our short-term memory to our long-term memory. Okay. So this idea of mindfulness being like open awareness is this sense that we're aware that we're conscious, that we have a mind. It's not just like a mirror, there is a knowing aspect. And then at the same time, we whatever is arising for us, we are aware of. So we can focus this mindfulness, this open awareness, in certain places. We can focus it on our thoughts, we can focus it on our emotions. We can focus it on tactile sensations. We can focus it on the outer world, or we can focus it on whatever is arising. Okay. So I can sit in meditation, calm myself, become aware of my consciousness, aware of my awareness, aware of the fact that I have a mind that is able to observe, and trying to it's a little difficult because typically we become absorbed in whatever it is that we're observing or thinking about, or listening to, or and we don't have that sense that there is another aspect of the mind that is always present, in order for us to even become absorbed in those thoughts or those ideas or those sensations or whatever it may be. So starting off with this awareness that I am aware, that I have consciousness, that there is a subjective aspect of the mind, or an observer. And then becoming aware of whatever is in consciousness. So if it's the warmth of the water, if it's whatever sights are around me, if it's whatever I'm hearing, if it's whatever I'm feeling, whatever mental things are coming up. And so it's this process of going back and forth actually a little bit quickly between what am I aware of and the fact that I am aware. Okay. And this is mindfulness. This is being present. So I answered one woman's question about, what do we do when we're feeling really overwhelmed with our emotions? And one thing we can do is practice this open awareness, this mindfulness of our feelings, of, in particular, the sensations that are going on in our body that are related to the whatever difficult emotion we're having. And that can actually bring us in touch with our own inner wisdom, our own ability to know what is it that I need right now to work with this emotion. And I can't necessarily fix all the uncertainty. I can't, create situations that will be different than what my situation is right now, but I can certainly learn to be present with whatever is arising. And simply being present with that helps it to release, helps me to calm down, helps me to see it in a different light, to see what I actually need to do to take care of myself and what I can do right now to help myself calm down. And this is when we feel like maybe the emotions are overwhelming or things are feeling difficult and out of control. We can bring this aspect of awareness and the calmness that observes that we are not necessarily our emotions. Because I am afraid right now doesn't mean that I am my fear. In fact, I am my awareness more. I am my ability to observe my fear. And that's actually a place of stillness. That's a place of calm. Okay, so that's mindfulness. So let's go on. So today what I wanted to talk about, and this is, I went back and forth about this, about talking about death, because it, of course, can be very anxiety provoking. And it's much more in our face in some ways. I mean, for those of us who are right between what is it, like 20 and 55 or 20 and 60, even if we get sick, there's like only an 80% chance that it's going to go deeper. For most of us who are healthy and are in this sort of adult age group, not older adult, and even children, but that's a different story. That if we do get sick, it's going to be pretty mild. I think, that's like 80% of us. But there's also this real, thing that people are dying from this disease, and many, many people are dying from this disease. And also, people die from disease all the time. I mean, there are constantly people who are dying, but we don't have an awareness of it in the same way that we do right now with this pandemic. I mean, if you're going on the news a lot, you see that all these numbers, like, right, I think today they said that the number of deaths in the US from the disease has equaled the number that were recorded in China. And so, it's real, right? Death is much more in front of us. And actually, when I do these courses, when it's not during this, this situation that we're having, I try to bring death into people's awareness, our own death, the death of our loved ones, because we tend to have a really good ability to go into denial, to try to push it away, to pretend like it isn't, like we know intellectually that we're going to die, but it never goes very deep. And even, on television, if you're doing some, binge watching and you're kind of into a lot of action, TV series or movies, we see a lot of death on television, if you watch those kinds of movies. But what we're told when we first start seeing these in television, when we're first experienced, is that it's not real, right? The people who are dying on your screen are not actually dying, right? They're actors. It's a story. They're pretending to die, right? And so we have a huge exposure to death on television, but we don't, it's never real death. For many of us, real death is further away. It's in it's in old people's homes, or it's in hospitals. And so it's rarely brought into focus for us right in front of our faces. And yet for Buddhism, having this awareness of death can be really, really powerful for us to use our lives very well, to use our time well, to prepare ourselves for this transition, to think about, what is death? What does death mean to me? How can I use my life so that it is a meaningful thing before my death comes? Because what happens when we don't take death seriously is that we tend to waste our lives. We tend to procrastinate, feel like we have lots and lots of time to do whatever. I can, I can spend my time doing this, because especially right now, if we're not working right now, or we're not in school right now, we think, oh well, I have, like 3 weeks to just hang out, right? And um and and it's kind of, for Buddhists, we think about death in order to make it much more immediate, to bring it into our awareness, so that we know that, if there are certain things we want to do in our life, if there are certain things we want to accomplish, if we want to prepare for our death, then we probably need to do it now. And I don't mean setting up your funeral arrangements or writing your will, but that's always encouraged, right? Even in Buddhist circles. But it's also this idea of, what are our minds going to be like? How are we going to deal with this huge fear that happens at death? How are we going to go through that and have a peaceful death? And then, of course, we talk about after death, what happens after death. And in Buddhism, they have definitely specific ideas. And I I also want to say that I don't offer these classes to try to convert people to Buddhism. I think that Buddhism has incredible techniques that are very helpful for anyone of any religion or no religion at all. Um, but I am coming from a Buddhist perspective, so I do present things from that point of view. So I'll present the ideas of what Buddhists believe happens after death. But Buddhism is not a, a religion that somehow thinks that other religions are all wrong. Um, in fact, His Holiness is very powerful. One of his main missions has been to encourage interfaith dialogue, because we all have such different minds. We all are going to benefit different ways from different systems. So Buddhism may not be the system that works for you or that makes sense to you, and that's fine. What's important is that you figure out what is meaningful, what's true for you, what's important to you, what is your experience. Okay. But I am going to present the Buddhist point of view. Okay. So let's talk a little bit more deeply about death. Okay, so the first thing we think about when we're doing a meditation on death, to bring death into our focus, to make it more real for us, is this idea that death is definite, that actually everybody is going to die eventually. Everybody does die eventually. And if what is it, like 100, let's say, some people are living longer these days. 120 years from now, even the babies that were just born will be dead. So every single human being on this earth in 120 years will be dead. And that includes us and you, each one of us. And, very wealthy people die, very beautiful people die, very ugly people die, very poor people die. Everybody dies. So it is definitely a part of us, right? It's definitely going to happen. So it's not really something we can escape from. And in Buddhism, we talk about bringing this, again, we bring this awareness of death closer, so we start to develop some urgency to practice now. Okay. The second one is the time of death is uncertain. We don't know when it's going to happen. Okay. We could die at any time. And this, of course, is much more possible um, now that this well, I don't know, actually. I mean, it's a deadly disease, coronavirus. We're doing everything we can. Um, but yeah, death has always been possible. You know, even things that help us, you know, can lead to our death. Like the food that we eat can poison us, the water that we drink. You know, we do things, we have jobs to keep us alive, and the transportation that gets us to those jobs, you know, can hurt us. You know, even, you know, keeping up our hygiene, which keeps us healthy, you know, we can hurt ourselves, fall in the shower, you know, it's, so death is, you know, and even, you know, let's see, average lifespan. So often some of us think, or, you know, most of us, I'm sure you've thought about how many, what is your average lifespan? So I think for me, like ethnicity and gender and that sort of thing, overall health, that kind of thing, uh, whether I'm a smoker or not, whether I have quality relationships or not, all of these contribute to the length of my lifespan. So I'm guessing, if I was going to be honest, because I've had a physical things, I'd say I'll probably make it to 85. So that gives me roughly 30 some years left. But that doesn't mean that it isn't going to happen in a week or in 2 weeks or in a month, right? It could happen at any time. There's no guarantee. People then younger than me in the same, you know, situation as me have died. You know, I actually had a friend who recently passed away, and she was 50. She was also a nun. She was also, yeah, you know, white and unmarried, and you know, like all those things. And yeah, you just don't know when it's going to happen. So then what is that actually going to help you at the time of death is your spiritual practice. Is what is your mind like? How calm are you? How ready are, you know, able are you and ready to deal with this situation? Okay. So I think that's all I want to say about that right now. And then we'll talk about after death, if we get to it today in a little bit. But I want to talk about one other thing before we go to questions. All right, let me move this. So let's talk about impermanence. So this term impermanence is used a little bit differently in the in its definitions within Buddhism. So we can talk about something being temporary, okay, in the sense that, like my cup, I use my cup all the time. You can see this. I can't see me. Hold on. There you go. Okay, so there's my cup. So my cup is definitely a temporary thing in the sense that someday it's going to break or it's going to fall apart and it's going to go back to being clay. So as a cup, it is temporary. It is not eternal. Okay. When we talk about eternal, sometimes we talk about things like the soul being eternal, lasting forever. We talk about God being eternal. Okay. In Buddhism, we talk about the mind being eternal. Okay. Lasting forever. We wouldn't say that this cup is eternal. Okay. Now, when we're talking in Buddhism, usually we use the term permanent as the same as eternal. Okay. So if we think about permanent markers are supposed to last forever, right? And of course they don't, but that's usually what we think of when we think of permanent. And in Buddhism, when we think of permanent, we think of unchanging. So even moment to moment, something that is unchanging. And very, very few things exist that are unchanging. Anything that is the result of causes and conditions is changes, okay? So then impermanence becomes changing, the constantly changing nature of things. So something can be eternal, last forever, and yet change moment to moment. And that's what we think of as the mind, being beginningless and being endless, but also changing moment to moment. Matter is also like this. They talk about the law of the conservation of matter. Matter, like this physical thing, is constantly changing, but the elements that it's made up of, we could talk about the subatomic particles, unless they're pulled apart by an atomic explosion. Those bonds are permanent, right? But they are also, this cup is constantly changing moment to moment. So gross impermanence is when we can see the change, okay? So death is an example of gross impermanence. When the mind separates from the body, that is very clear change, right? It's very obvious change. And it doesn't happen in a moment. You know, death is actually a process. Another example of gross impermanence that we can see is aging, but we can only see it when it's spanned a certain amount of time, right? So like I can look at a picture of myself, let's say 20 years ago, okay? And then I look in the mirror now and I can see that I have aged, okay, with my senses. And that is gross impermanence. That is the changing of my body on this more obvious level. But if I start to look more closely at when that change actually happens, that I cannot see. So I don't become older, you know, my body doesn't age like every January 1st, right? All of a sudden there's this big change. And it doesn't age, you know, like on my birthday, you know, as soon as I'm, you know, turn 59 this year, when I turn 59, I won't be able to, that's not when the aging appears, okay? So I can actually know that I have aged, not because I can see it happening, but because I can see the change over time, okay? But when that change actually happens, I cannot see, okay? So let me give you and this is the example of subtle impermanence. The fact that things are changing moment to moment is subtle impermanence, okay? And this I cannot see, okay, with my senses. So, but I know it's happening because I see it over time. I can compare from in the past to in the future, okay? So let's give another example. Let's say somebody built a house next to your childhood home, and they built this brand new beautiful house, and they fixed it up really nice and they painted it, and then you go away for 20 years, okay? And you don't visit that house at all, and you come back and no one has kept it up and it's just fallen apart, okay? So that's another example of gross or obvious impermanence. Now, when did that change actually take place, okay, of that house falling apart? Did it take place, you know, every Saturday, then it got a little bit older? Did it take place, you know, every other week or every month? No, it constantly changed. It constantly was falling apart. It was interacting with the elements, the rain, the wind, whatever was going on at a subatomic level with the electrons and protons and so forth. The aging that happened, the deterioration of that house happened moment to moment. Now, if we talk about what a moment is, so let me see if I can do this. I think it's really important. Maybe I'll try it here, annotate. Okay, so let's talk about what is a moment, okay? A moment in time. So definition of a moment in time is the smallest instant of time that you can imagine, okay, or that you can experience, the smallest instant of time. So I think in physics, they're down to something like a nanosecond, okay? So let's say a moment in time is a nanosecond, okay? And so I'll draw it. Where's my pointer? Where'd it go? Okay. Oh, maybe it's not going to work. All right, there we go. All right. So let's say that this is a moment in time, okay? So we have a moment in time right there, all right? Already the smallest moment that we can possibly imagine. Now let's divide that. I don't know if this, okay, let's divide that in half. So we have a beginning of the moment and we have an end of the moment now, right? Because every moment, even though it's the very smallest that we can imagine, can be divided into the beginning of it and the end of it, okay? And then we can take the second half, the end of the moment, and we can divide it too, can't we? We can talk about the end of the moment being divided into the beginning of the end and the end of the end, okay? So every moment can be divided then even smaller, okay? Then we can take the end of the end, let's see where I am, I'm over here, okay. The end of the end, and we can divide it into the beginning of the end and the end of the end of the end, okay? So everything, time included, can be divided into smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller pieces infinitely, okay? Infinitely. All right, now, when does it disappear? Okay, it doesn't ever disappear because time still exists and moves, but is it actually there? On a relative or a conventional level, or on sort of a practical level, yes, time moves. But when we start to analyze, we can't actually find when something exists, okay, in time. All right, so let's again take this cup, for example. Okay, if this cup is constantly changing from moment to moment, and time barely exists, there is actually, practically, there is not a moment in which the cup exists as the exact same cup, does it? Okay, it's constantly changing. Now it looks like it's not changing, right? Our appearance to our senses is that it's not changing. But through our reasoning, we can know that actually, in order for it to eventually fall apart, be destroyed, you know, age, that it has to be changing moment to moment. But when does the cup actually abide or exist as a cup? If there is no time in which it is the exact same thing, when is there actually a cup? Now, on a practical, again, conventional level, of course there's a cup. I can drink from a cup, right? But through my reasoning, when I start to analyze more deeply, I start to see that things are disappearing. They're barely there. They're barely there. They're actually there through this coming together of causes and conditions in this moment, including my mind, okay, that looks at the cup. So this is one of the aspects of reality that we're trying to develop when we are um, when we are that we're trying to develop when we're developing wisdom. Okay, so bringing death, bringing change into our awareness at all times, doing meditations on impermanence, doing meditations on change, get us more prepared for when these difficult times of change come. Okay, so when these times of huge change that we weren't necessarily ready for, that we take it in stride. It's like, well, of course things are changing all the time. That's the nature of the universe. Nothing ever stays the same. It's always moving. And so then when it comes up like, oh no, I don't know what's, my life is going to change because of this coronavirus. I could lose my friends and family. I could, I don't know what's happening with my job. I don't know what's happening with my finances. I don't know what's happening with my own health. We get more comfortable with this idea that yes, this is the nature of things. This is how things are. And so then accepting change becomes much easier. We become much more, again, back to this calm state of mind. What do I need to do to help me now? How can I deal with this in a way that doesn't overwhelm me, that doesn't get me, you know, get out of control for me? Okay, I think that's all I want to say. I went a little over, so we'll do question. Oh, but we're doing a longer question and answer session after the class. So maybe we'll do like 10 minutes of question and answer now, and then we'll do like 20 minutes of meditation. And then we'll break for 5 minutes, and then we'll do some more question and answer. Okay, Felipe?
Yes, I'm here. So I'm going to ask one question on behalf of someone who preferred me to read his question.
Sure.
So the question is, I had a hard time, a near-death experience that was very close to end up differently. I'm still today between practices and retreat to work on my mind, but also celebrating life in a very worldly way, like long parties and extreme acts. It is not a destructive way, but in a sense of celebrating the moment. Is there some elements that must be changed? Does the Buddhist point of view is that I'm losing my time? That's the question.
Well, I think it depends on your intention. You know, if your intention in, you know, in celebrating life is to, you know, make other people happy, to help yourself to grow and be happy, then definitely. Now, it also depends on what your view of when death comes, what is your view of what's after, okay? So if you have a view that life ends with death, that when the brain dies, the mind dies, then it would make total sense to create as much joy and celebration in the world for yourself and others as possible, so long as it isn't hurting you. I mean, you wouldn't want to be partying all the time and hurting your body, because that's eventually going to make you suffer, get you, you know, you'll get sick. And also, yeah, so that's just one aspect of it. You know, whether there are drugs or alcohol involved, that's a whole nother story. But from a Buddhist point of view, there's also a sense of preparing for your death. So working on your mind, because what happens at the moment of your death can be very powerful in what your next life is going to be like. Okay, so then from a Buddhist point of view, if it's you're only focusing externally on others and you know you can celebrate life in lots of different ways, but if this is how you are celebrating life, then it may be that that you want to spend some time working on your mind as well, you know, developing this ability, like we've been talking about, to focus, to analyze, to find that peace that is in your mind. But like I said, it really depends on your view of what comes after.
Okay, now I'm going to unmute Dr. Inderjit, so you can ask your question out loud.
Good morning. Good morning.
Hello.
Yeah, so really wonderful sessions. So my question is that when I'm mindful, so I'm in a completely meditative state, say continuously I'm in that meditative state. So can I feel or observe the subtle changes which are happening? So when I'm in meditation, I feel a lot of something happening in my body, maybe my breathe, or something happening when I'm thinking. I actually can feel something is happening in my brain. So is it that when we are more mindful, more meditative, so we can observe these subtle changes also which are happening around us?
Yes, definitely. There's a teaching, it's called the 4 Applications of Mindfulness. And I received a teaching on this and by Samdong Rinpoche And he talked about the fact that practicing mindfulness on the body, that when we get really, really subtle, we can actually start to observe states within like our internal organs. So yes, that's definitely possible.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Should we do another one?
Yes.
I'm going to unmute Salo, so you can now ask your question out loud.
Hello.
Hello.
My question is if there's any specific practice to bring the awareness of death closer.
Okay.
Like, yes, that's.
Yeah, sure. So this analytic meditation that I described when I was talking about this, death is definite and the time of death is uncertain, and the only thing that can benefit you is spiritual practice at the time of death. This can be expanded into some of the supporting reasons why death is definite. And then you can bring it into your own experience of like people you've known who have died, or one of the things that my teacher, Venerable Rabina, talks about is anytime you hear about death, or anytime you've met her, yeah? Anytime, yeah, anytime, you know, like you see an animal that has died, or you hear about death in the newspaper, that you say to yourself, that will be me one day. That will be me. So that's something that I try to do as much as I can. Wow, that's going to be me. You know, just sort of bring, and even just saying that can really help you start to make it more real for yourself.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay, another one.
Okay, we go with Alex. Now I'm going to mute you. You can ask your question out loud.
Hi, good morning for you. My question is, I'm a nurse and a grief counselor in end-of-life care, and as a practitioner, I wonder how medications like morphines interfere with the end-of-life experience for the dying people.
Yeah. So in what I haven't practiced hospice. I've had a little bit of exposure to teachings on the Buddhist way of managing it, but my understanding is that they talk about trying to manage the pain in a way that you can also keep consciousness as long as possible. Okay, so that's one thing. The other thing is that when that's no longer possible, when people start to lose consciousness, then the people around them can be doing practices, you know, saying prayers, and, you know, not in a way that will help them die comfortably and smoothly. They often say that when people are passing away, you don't want to be crying or telling them to stay, or you probably know this better than me. So how it affects the mind, I think it does definitely affect the mind. But, and then the other thing is that that's why it's so important to practice before we get to that point. You know, that if we like that, when I was studying earlier, when I first started studying, they would talk a lot about how bringing, like, exposing yourself to images of the Buddha or images of your teacher, or saying mantras a lot, or saying prayers, actually makes it more likely that as you're dying, that's the content that will be in your mind. And so so that's another thing we can do, is, you know, to get people ready. I know you may have heard, you may know this better than me, but for people to let go of their regrets, right? Let go of their regrets in life. And so reminding people of how kind they were, how loving they were, of their positive actions that they did in life, can actually help uplift them, so that when they're moving into their next life, they actually have a very positive, or, you know, virtuous state of mind. So that's something else. Sure.
Thank you.
You're welcome. One more.
One more? Okay, I'm
Yes.
going to unmute Apurva. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your names.
No, that's all right, actually. Apurva. Thank you. So I wanted to ask if mindfulness in itself, like, like you said, being aware of one's awareness, can it not cause too much anxiety in itself? And because I feel that it leads to questions of why and how, and, questions that do not have definite answers. So does that not defeat the purpose of mindfulness?
So the actual practice of mindfulness is learning to simply observe what is going on in the mind. And we're making a distinction between observing and following or generating or elaborating. So those are the things when our mind starts to do that, starts to expand on whatever is arising, that's what creates the overwhelm, the anxiety, the fear, the too much. When we're coming from a place of calmness and we're coming from a place of observation, we can see those things arise, but as soon as they arise, we acknowledge them, we notice them, and then we let them go. Okay, then it's like, oh, there's another thought, because the mind can make up anything. It's very good at generating anything. And actually bringing those fears, those ideas, those anxieties into awareness and then letting them go is more healthy for the mind, because if we just push them down and suppress them, they go into the body, they make us sick, they make us explode, at other times. But when we can be mindful and present with these thoughts, with these difficulties, it's easier to release them, to let them go. And if the mind, the thinking, if you can't do that, right? If it's just too difficult, if you're continually getting pulled into or led away by the thoughts, then you may need to focus on the body more and let go of the whatever is arising in the mind. Just each time it comes up, you can imagine it as a water bubble, because it is so barely there. I mean, thoughts, they're not physical. They're just barely there. They just feel powerful to us. But you can imagine them like a water bubble that floats up and then explodes, right? No, it doesn't explode, just disappears, dissolves. Like if you're blowing bubbles, how they kind of wink out of existence, like that.
Yeah.
Okay, and let the thoughts do that.
Yeah, sometimes the thoughts are so recurring, like they repeat themselves, and that is something difficult to deal with.
Yeah, focus on the relaxation. Focus on relaxing your body. And there are guided meditations that are specific to relaxation, that take you deep into relaxing your muscles, and that will allow your mind to slow.
Thank you.
Sure, thank you. Okay.
All right, we move on to meditation. Or you want to do one more?
No, let's do some meditation.
Okay, good. So everyone, please go back to a comfortable position, go back to your posture, and trying to keep as much as possible the body grounded and the back especially loosely upright, not tensing up and also not sinking in the posture. But rather just maintaining balance. And allowing the bell to bring you into the space of the body first. Using the opportunity to let your awareness become grounded by simply exploring and noticing the physical sensations that arise where your body is in contact with the cushion, the ground, the chair, whatever surface you're sitting on. And then gently expand that awareness, covering the entire space of the body, becoming aware of physical sensations, connecting with your own body. Noticing whatever arises without creating too many discursive thoughts about it, simply experiencing. And in order to bring back your body to its natural state, a state of balance, give yourself the luxury of 3 deep breaths, filling in the lungs to their full capacity with the in-breath, breathing in fully, and then letting go, releasing the breath naturally. And again, breathing in calmness and relaxation, breathing out any tension or tightness in the body, breathing in peace, breathing out worries and concerns. And then simply allowing the body to settle down. Take a moment to observe this state of calmness and relaxation. Let the body rest. Let go of the doing energy of the mind and simply experience this moment of calmness. There's nothing you need to do right now. Simply be with the body as it is. And using the opportunity of being focused in the body now, we can begin to investigate, to actually do some analysis. And so begin by paying attention to any physical sensation that arises in the space of the body. Whatever comes up to your mind more obviously can be a physical sensation such as temperature, pressure, comfort, discomfort, pain, tingling, itchiness, whatever it is and wherever in the body it's located. Take a moment and simply pay attention to that sensation. But this time investigate its changing nature. Is the sensation in the same place with the same intensity all the time? Or is it changing moment to moment? But even if this sensation seems to be unchanging, if you cannot really detect its impermanent nature, you can use your reasoning. If this particular sensation was permanent, then you would have to feel it all the time in the same place for the rest of your life. Is that even possible? Is it the case that it doesn't change at all? And to investigate further, we can think about how our bodies are composed of so many parts, and these physical sensations arise due to so many interactions, hundreds of thousands of biochemical reactions going on right now in your own body. Our bodies are made of cells, which are constantly moving, carrying certain compounds around the body, dividing themselves, coming into existence, and disintegrating. This is happening in every inch of your body right now. And those cells in turn are made out of molecules. Those molecules are made out of atoms. The atoms contain subatomic particles. And at this level, there's not a single instant, not a millisecond, where things are not moving, changing. The atoms are being rearranged, exchanging energy, colliding against each other. There's not a single instant where things are not moving and shifting around. See if you can connect with this impermanence, with this changing nature of your own body, how every single component of your body right now is changing moment by moment. The air you're breathing right now, the food you ate before, the water that you might have drunk, everything interacts with your body, becomes processed and changes into a part of your body. Even these things that we cannot notice are definitely taking place. And this is not true only for our bodies, because they are an organic living entity, but it is true for everything in this universe. The surface that you're sitting on, the walls on your room, the windows, the floor, your clothes, all are made out of very similar atoms and particles. Everything constantly changing, moment by moment, in a constant state of flux. There's absolutely nothing that stays the same. The roads, the cars, the trees, the mountains, the clouds, other people. Everything that we can perceive with our senses is constantly changing. See if you can accept this fact deeply. To really let this awareness of change sink into your heart. And this is true not only for physical entities, but also for mental events. Take a moment to bring the awareness to the space of the mind, to be aware of your thoughts, of your feelings and emotions in this very moment. And again, investigate them. Notice if what you're thinking, what you're feeling is changing from one moment to the next. And again, even if you cannot detect a very obvious change, you can use your reasoning, knowing how we don't feel exactly the same all the time. We don't have exactly the same thoughts all the time. Thoughts are also transient, ephemeral. They come into being, they abide for a moment, and then they dissolve, giving rise to another thought or another experience. The mind, just like the body, is impermanent, changing moment by moment. And bring in this awareness of impermanence. Let it sink in. It is simply something that we need to accept. Things are changing all the time. And perhaps this may trigger a little bit of unease, a feeling of uncertainty. But we can rather focus on the positive sides of impermanence. The fact that everything is changing and that change is the nature of all things opens up infinite possibilities for ourselves. We are not stuck with our destructive emotions. We are not stuck with our bad habits. We can actually change them. Mind can be changed. And so we can make use of our own volition to make conscious changes for the best. To set an intention to develop our minds to their highest potential. Because change is possible. And whenever things change in a way that we don't want it to, we can simply accept, knowing that this is the nature of all things. Having an awareness of change, we can simply let go, giving rise to the thought, let it go, this too shall pass. So as much as possible, let impermanence and an awareness of it be an useful tool in your life, allowing you to cope with difficult situations and encouraging you to change your mind for the better. And slowly coming out of the meditation, becoming aware of your body, your surroundings, and trying to keep as much as possible, even after the meditation, this awareness of impermanence. And we move on to the dedication, having set up a proper motivation, having done the practice, we now offer whatever good energy, whatever positive potential we have created by this practice to everyone who is struggling, who is going through difficulties. And so for that, we'll read from Shantideva. May all beings everywhere, plagued by sufferings of body and mind, obtain an ocean of happiness and joy by virtue of my merits. May no living creature suffer, commit evil, or ever fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled with a mind weighed down by depression. May the blind see forms and the deaf hear sounds. May those whose bodies are worn with toil be restored and find in repose. May the naked find clothing, the hungry find food. May the thirsty find water and delicious drinks. May the poor find wealth, those weak with sorrow find joy. May the forlorn find hope, constant happiness, and prosperity. May there be timely rains and bountiful harvests. May all medicines be effective and wholesome prayers bear fruit. May all who are sick and ill quickly be freed from the ailments. Whatever diseases are in the world, may they never occur again. May the frightened cease to be afraid, and those bound be freed. May the powerless find power, and may people think with benefit in each other. For as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remain, until then may I too remain, to dispel the mysteries of the world. May it be so. Okay.
Okay, thank you, everyone. If I could make a request, if you have the means, if you found this helpful, to donate to Tushita, it'll help us to continue to be able to provide these. The donation information, the link is in the email that you received when you registered, but you don't need to feel obligated in any way. We're offering this freely, and please come back next week. But if you can, then donate. Thank you. And also, so we'll take, let's say, a 5-minute break. If you want to stay on or if you want to come back, and then we'll start. If you have any more questions, we'll do just a Q&A starting in about 5 minutes. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, hello everyone. We're gonna do this a bit differently, so you don't need to type in your questions in the chat now. What we're going to do is that there's a raise hand button on this app on Zoom. So whether you're in a computer or a smartphone or wherever device, you can find the raise hand button, and then you can press that, and I'll start unmuted in order all those who have questions who raise their hands, so that we do it more interactively. Okay. In that way, also you can ask more general questions or whatever questions you have. We have extra hour to do just Q&A. And for all the rest, if you're happy to stay and to listen to the question and answer session, then we'll keep going on. So please, everyone who has a question now, hit the raise hand button, and we can go on from there.
Okay.
The raise hand button is usually, if you're on a smartphone, it should be part of the interface of the app. And if you're in a computer, if you hover on the video, it should show you some options. One of them is chat, record, and one of them is the raise hand.
I can't see it in mine either.
No?
No.
Let me Google it for an image.
Okay. I have reactions, recording. Oh, I should stop and start the recording.